It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. We're back from our break. We've got two more segments to go. And what we're going to touch on are the two following topics in our next segments. One, the issue of Greenwald's partner. His partner was grabbed off of an airplane in Heathrow Airport. And because they suspected him of having information related to the Snowden affair, Greenwald, for the record, by the way, is the guy who, broke the NSA story. They grabbed this guy and they held him for 9 hours, which is the maximum limit allowable by law in Britain. And what they were doing, or what they were seeking to do, was hack this guy down so that they could they forced him basically to reveal the password to his phone and so forth. Now, he was carrying some information that was related to the Greenwald issue and the Snowden case. And he was transferring that information from the woman, the co-author of a lot of that stuff in Germany, back to Britain, where it could be turned over to Greenwald, I guess. So, but make no mistake about it, that's not an act of terrorism. I mean, here you are looking at a case where they're accusing this guy, and they held him under their Schedule 7 Terrorism Act of 2000 of 2000. They abused the terrorism law to keep information from you. That's the real problem here. So, Britain forced Guardian to, or the Guardian's, the boyfriend of the guy from a Guardian, to reveal his passwords. And actually, the Guardian newspaper came out and wrote an article the other day, and this is their op-ed. And the reason I say that this is an important story for you to read is because what you're going to find out in the next 30 seconds is that Britain, the government of Britain, also forced the Guardian to destroy the contents of a computer, two computers actually, that they had in their basement that contained Snowden material. Now, I want you to hear this because it's really, really important stuff. Because when you understand the depth of the depravity to which these governments are now going to keep this silent, you're going to be stunned. The editor of The Guardian wrote this op-ed. And he has written an article that states that the British government threatened legal action against the newspaper unless it either destroyed the classified documents or handed them back to British authorities. Now, this was posted on Monday by the editor of The Guardian. His name is Alan Rusbridger. And the newspaper had already published a couple of the Snowden stories. And a British official said to him, quote, "You've had your fun. Now we want the stuff back." Now, I want you to listen to this segment in the context of free speech and what governments are doing, not just the United States government, but the UK government and other governments, by the way. This is not just limited to them, but this is directly related to those two. And how they are twisting arms, but going actually beyond arm twisting. And here's where we get to the rub. After further talks with the government, Rusbridger says two, quote, security experts from Government Communications Headquarters, the British equivalent of the ultra-secretive U.S. National Security Agency, visited the Guardian's London office. In the building's basement, says Rusbridger, government officials watched. Now listen to this. This is terribly, terribly important. Government officials watched as computers which contained material provided by Snowden were physically pulverized. In other words, they made them destroy these computers. And they stood and watched. Now, why didn't they destroy them? Because that gives them plausible deniability to say, we didn't do it. They did it. But, that's like saying, well, this guy's a murderer. He's not a murderer. He's only a murderer because you held a gun on him and his kids and said, if you don't pull the trigger on that guy, I'm going to kill you and your children and your wife. That does not a murderer make. Here's what the guy from the government said to him. We can call off the black helicopters. Jokingly. So, Russ Bridger says, one of the officials joked, guess we can now call off the black helicopters. Boy, oh boy. Is that a telling statement or what? The Guardian has made a decision to come out and publicize this threat. And I applaud them for having the courage to do so. Because what they're doing is blowing the whistle on government tyranny. And tyranny it is. Make no mistake about it. This is the early steps and the shot across the bow, if you will, of those media organizations who truly want to report truth, but are under enormous pressure and coercion and threats, physical and otherwise, by governments to keep their secrets secret. Now, what is the function and the responsibility of a free press? To act as a watchdog over government. That's their function. That's their role. Quite honestly, all of the other fluff and stuff out there that you hear is marketing. When stories are telling you about the cat who fell down the well and the baby that survived and early birth and whatever other nonsense that they come out with, entertainment news, all of that stuff is all intended to keep you distracted. It's not meant to inform and educate. It serves no functional, useful purpose. It's like reading the Guinness World Book of Records. It's interesting, but it's not applicable in the real world. It's freak show stuff. But it's become so commonplace today that nobody recognizes the truth of what it is. They think it's entertainment. If news is about entertainment, then what is entertainment about? See, that's the problem. News organizations are not supposed to be entertaining you. They're supposed to be educating you and informing you so that you can act and make decisions based on appropriate quantities of information, utilizing all the facts and information at your disposal to direct government's action. That is what it's for. There's no other purpose. You are the boss of government. It is supposed to be a government of, by, and for the people. But when the information is withheld from you, therefore barring you and prohibiting you from making an intelligent decision based on all the available information and facts, then you're not really making an informed decision. You'll notice that I use the word all the available information and facts. What's secret is not available. And that jumps back to our earlier segments. When the Department of Justice is keeping their policies and decisions on how to act based upon a court decision secret, then there is no such thing as a rule of law. Because if they're using secret information to determine how they're going to act in certain cases and situations, that they're withholding from the public, then how is the public supposed to know what the law actually is? And that goes back to the earliest point I made, which is that our founders said any law that is so complex that the average person cannot understand it is no law at all. And it is, in fact, tyranny. On Sunday, British authorities held and detained the domestic partner of Glenn Greenwald. He's the Guardian writer, and he met up, with Snowden, got all the information, and blew the thing wide open. That and the Washington Post. Although the Guardian's been far harsher about it. Although I have to give kudos of late to the Washington Post, because normally a sycophantic mouthpiece for the administration, in this case, they're actually stepping up and doing something right. And again, I caution you, never be so ideologically blinded by your own Kool-Aid that you're unwilling to stand up and give credit where it's due. That's why I say to you, when an elected representative does something good, you should call him or her and say, thank you for taking a stand on that issue. Now, when they do wrong, you should be equally harsh, in condemning what they've done wrong. But irrespective, we always respect truth, no matter from what source it comes. And we always respect and encourage courage itself. Courage to stand up and do those things which are considered outside the boundaries of what government wants a newspaper, in this case, to do. In other words, if they are a printed insurgent, we stand up for that because they're not bowing to government pressure. The press is supposed to be staunchly and fiercely independent. And when they are, then we should applaud that. The Washington Post, in many cases, is a mouthpiece for this administration. But of late, they have been standing up and doing some amazing revelations in line with and in cooperation with The Guardian. So let's understand what happened here last week, or on Sunday, with David Miranda. Now, that's the guy's name who's Greenwald's partner, and he lives in Brazil. I think actually Greenwald does too, although it's a kind of a nebulous. I'm not quite sure where they live. I know apparently based on the fact that they're partners, life partners, that they're gay, but I don't know where that means they live. He was detained by British authorities under an anti-terrorism law when he was in transit from from Berlin, going back to Brazil to home. And he, excuse me, he was changing planes. He was changing planes in Heathrow Airport. Now, if you remember the show I did a little while ago, where I said that the government is now nabbing you domestically here in the U.S. within 100 miles of every border, that means when you fly into LaGuardia or JFK Airport, or you fly into Chicago, or, well, maybe not Chicago if it's not within 100 miles of a boundary, you fly into Miami Airport, you fly into LAX, you fly into any of these airports that are within 100 miles of a border, they're considering that a non-constitutional zone. That's for real, folks. That's direct out of the ACLU's mouth. The federal government considers those unconstitutional zones. Constitution-free is the phrase they use. Wow! You're telling me that a border or an airport is a constitution-free zone? Can that be possible in the United States of America in this short a window of opportunity? I mean, we're 13 years into the century, and we've gone from what most people would have assumed in 2000 to be a government that is operating within the boundaries of law, maybe skirts a few here and there, plays around a little bit, but suddenly we've gone from that to an absolute police state in 13 years. Is that possible? Of course it's possible. It's more than possible. It's happening right now. And if you're unwilling to acknowledge it or understand it, then that's on you, because that's willful ignorance at this point. They grabbed a hold of this guy as he went through London's Heathrow. They held him. Now, the U.S. immediately came out and said, we didn't tell him what to do. But they were tipped off by London that they were going to do this and grab this guy. And you can bet, boy, that I would have given anything to be a fly on the wall for that conversation. One U.S. security official told Reuters that one of the main purposes of the British government's detention and questioning of Miranda was to send a message to recipients of Snowden's materials, including The Guardian, that the British government was serious about trying to shut down leaks. Man, listen to the dialogue here. White House spokesman Josh Earnest told reporters on Monday that while the United States did not ask British authorities to detain Miranda, British officials had given the U.S. a heads up about the British government's plan to question him. A source familiar, hang on a minute, let me jump back. Russ Bridger, this is the editor of The Guardian, who wrote this article about how they made them destroy Guardian computers and pulverize them. How they did that, I don't know. What did they do, take a hammer to the hard drives? I have no idea. But here's where it gets interesting, because Russ Bridger and The Guardian have backbone. And they don't have spaghetti in their spinal columns, they have steel, and here's where it gets rubbed. Here's where the rub comes. Russ Bridger, in his article on The Guardian's website, said that despite the destruction of the computers in London, he told British officials that due to the nature of, quote, international collaborations among journalists, it would remain possible for media organizations to, quote, take advantage of the most permissive legal environments. Henceforth, he said, Guardian, quote, did not have to do our reporting from London. Kudos to you, Mr. Russ Bridger. What he's saying there, folks, is you guys can destroy these computers. That's okay. We'll just publish our articles from outside of England. And that I applaud. That took courage. That took chutzpah. That took brass. To turn around and say to them, you can destroy these machines, but what we're going to do, and don't make the mistake of thinking you're getting it all, what we're going to do is simply publish outside of the UK. And obviously the United States. Once we publish it on the internet, there's nothing you can do to take it back. And that is the power of information. That is the power of information released. If you ever want to see the perfect example of how information can change an entire dialogue, just look at the Edward Snowden affair. The guy said, here's all this information you people should know about. And what was his quote that was played over and over and over and over again? These are not decisions that should be made by government. These are decisions that should be made by people themselves. In other words, whether to be surveilled or not. And he's right. These are not government's decisions to make on our behalf under the nebulous claim that it's for your protection and you don't have a right to know. You just have an obligation to stand down and let us do what we want. That, folks, are the words of a tyrant. Those are words of tyranny. And when you hear that, your red flags should be flying. Your hair should be standing on end. And every sixth sense you have should be tingling. When you hear words like that, when you hear words from President Obama, who goes to a university for a commencement speech this spring, and says, or this summer, and says to students, there are those who will tell you that there is tyranny hiding around every tree and behind every corner. Ignore those voices. I hearken you back to the words of one of our greatest patriots, Madison, who says, crisis is the rallying cry of the tyrant. And they warned us over and over and over that tyrants would use that type of language to soothe us, to assuage our fears, to quiet us down, to make us cower, to allow themselves to usurp and abscond and steal power in great and voluminous quantities that for all intents and purposes, once they have, they never give back and they never give up. I tell you what, I'm encouraged by what the Guardian has done here. They've put the British government on notice that the Guardian is going to continue to report the Snowden things, whatever other information they have, well outside of British government jurisdiction. And, it's a gauntlet that they picked up. And that shows me that they're in this for the right reasons. Yeah, I'm sure they're making money because they're getting all kinds of, press and publicity, and people are flocking to that newspaper to buy it or visit it online and hitting their ads and all the other stuff that goes along with that. But I got to tell you, if that's what journalism is all about now, and it's not about reporting truth anymore, it's just trying to get people to flock to your website to click on the ads so you can get paid or to sell more newspapers, then the Fourth Estate has lost its way. And all too often here in the United States of America, we know that to be true. Don't think it's only happening here. It's happening everywhere. Newspapers, magazines, media systems of all sorts, whether it's radio or television, doesn't make any difference. All of these media organizations are doing the same thing. They are betraying the trust of the nation that they represent. They have a duty, an obligation, a fiduciary duty, if you will, to honestly act as a watchdog on federal government or national or state government, where it depends on whatever situation they're in, because their job is to investigatively report on what government's doing. The rest of it, folks, is all just fluff and marketing. Those newspapers that are interested in doing it for the right reasons will stick to their guns. The rest of them will feed you pabulum, chalk. And that's what you find in Communist News Network, faux news. That's what you find at MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, NPR, the New York Times in many cases. Used to be the Washington Post, and in many cases still is. I'm not giving these guys a pass. I'm just saying that when a press organization comes out and blows the whistle, we have an obligation to listen and support and approve of that so that they feel confident in blowing the whistle again. In other words, we don't want to treat them in a way that says to them, hey, don't do this again because nobody supported you in the first place. We approve. We applaud. We support. The way that they've done this on this Greenwald thing was grabbing the hold of this guy and holding him, for all intents and purposes, as a prisoner. And that, ladies and gentlemen, for the purposes of coercing the passwords out of him, and then they seized all of his electronic equipment, his phone, his thumb drives, everything they could get their hands on, laptops, the whole 9 yards. That was government terrorism. We'll be right back.